Hi everybody, my name is Greg Ellis and welcome to Redskin Review. Tonight's show is being taped on Monday, October 25th. And in this show, we're going to take a look back at the Redskins' big win over Loveland. We'll take a look at the last game of the season against Lakota West, and we'll talk about a few other things along the way. As always, with me is my partner, Dan Alvarez, Coach Suriano. Welcome, guys. And let's jump right into the Loveland game, Coach. A great offensive performance, probably the best offensive performance of the year, I think.
Yeah, it was by far. And not only that, our kids overall played the best game that they had played all year. Played with a lot of emotion, played with a lot of intensity. We executed very well, really on both sides of the ball. To put 49 points on the board against a team that the most they had given up to anyone was 17. If you had asked me before the game if I thought we'd have put 49 up, I'd have probably said no. Just that they just weren't giving up very many points. And then the fact that we rushed for so much yardage. You know, last year they held us to 100 yards rushing, really was under 100 yards, and they had 6 people back on defense. And then to be able to rush the ball for 215 yards, and then and then the fact that we threw for 323. Really, and our offense was 538 yards, and Vinny was 20 for 27 passing, and we just had great balance between the run and the pass, and that really kept them off balance, and we were able to move the football, and we put together that first drive in the very beginning and went down and set the tone for the game. And I thought after I saw that you know, just the way we were executing, that we would play very well. And then you take a look at what our defense did. Our defense held them, I believe, to 8 yards rushing. Now, they threw the ball on us and had a great deal of success with the screen passes. But I said before the game that if we could rush the football and we could stop the run, then regardless of everything else that happened, we would win the game. The other thing that I thought was a huge factor in the game was we overcame some adversity. And we had not been able to do that throughout the course of the year. You know, we had 2 turnovers that led to their scores offensively, and then we had 2 turnovers in the special teams that led to their scores. And usually when you do that, you know, you're not going to win the game, but we were able to overcome that. And then the fact that we had far too many penalties. We had 13 penalties for 142 yards, which is far too much. But still, that just shows you how well we were actually playing on offense and defense to overcome those things. And that was a good Loveland football team. You know, they were 4-4 coming into the game, but boy, they had some hard luck defeats. You know, when they lost to Mason by 4 points and Glen Estee by 5 points, and you know, that was a good football team, and our kids just really played their best football game of the year. And you know, our players have never quit, and you know, I think a lot of people thought that we may fold our tents after the Mason game, and just the opposite occurred, where they really strapped it on and tried to get better. We made some adjustments on both sides of the football. If you look at us, we're running a little more out of 2 backs now, and we're using the H-back more with Jake Kloos and putting him in motion and doing some things. So we've kind of tweaked our offense a little bit, and we've changed our scheme defensively, and I think those things have really helped us. We're playing to the strengths of our players, and you know, hopefully we can keep it up here in week 10.
Well, I'll tell you, it's senior night, last home game for the seniors, and the seniors on offense, especially the skill position players, really stepped up. They had a great game, all of them.
Yeah, we had to do that. I mean, we knew, excuse me, we knew they would really be strong, you know, in the interior, and we felt that we had to have a good game throwing the football, which we did. You know, and the receivers stepped up and played very well.
Vince Palmer, 4 touchdown passes, and he had more than 300 yards, I believe, passing, didn't he?
Yeah, 323. He was 20 of 27. And I believe, I have to go back and look through my records, but just, you know, as I was telling Vinny off the top of my head with my memory, I do not remember having a quarterback that threw for that much yardage in one football game. And I think that is a single game passing record.
He had a great game. He's had a great year.
Yeah, yes. Yeah,
the game, we got to a 28-7 lead, and then they came back, taking advantage of a couple of turnovers we had.
Yep.
But then the game was tied up in the third quarter, and I thought probably the biggest play of the game was when they had just tied it up. We had a 3rd and 25 in our own territory. We had a big pass to Mike Zeiss for the first down.
Yeah, actually it was 3rd and 30, and I know on my play sheet I don't have a whole lot of plays for 3rd and 30, but we had one, and And it worked. But I thought the big thing there was our players never panicked. You know, we kind of used the term of not having a breaking point, no breaking point. And they tied it up, and instead of panicking, we just picked it up and put it into high gear and went back after it. And you know, they never lost their composure. And even at halftime, when we went in and they had those two quick scores there in the second quarter, and all of a sudden you go in as 28-21, we still stayed positive. We said it was going to boil down to who would make the most plays when it counted and who would make the least amount of mistakes in the second half would win the football game. And you know, I think we made the most plays when it counted, particularly the long pass to Nate Fields there in the final drive, and we were able to win the football game because of those things.
Seemed like defensively you guys playing a lot better than what you have been, and it seems like you, against the run especially, you did a lot better. But the only thing was you gave up a couple big plays. I think a couple screen passes.
Yeah, it was more than a couple. And the thing with that, Danny, is screens are hard to simulate in practice with your scout team to run it as efficiently as someone. They are a very good screen football team. We saw that, and you know, you can practice that, but that's their bread and butter. And so they really do a great job with it. And then to try to simulate that in practice so that you give your defensive team a good look at it is hard to do. And no matter how hard you try, you can't run it as efficiently as they do in the game. And we struggled with that. And we tried putting people on certain people, and tried to play the screen. And there were times when we missed some tackles, and times when they caught us in a blitz. And there was various reasons of why they were successful on the screens, but. The bottom line was they didn't have enough to win the game.
Well, I think a couple times that you guys were there actually for the tackles, and you did miss them, and it ended up being a big, big gainers.
Right, and that happens.
Yeah.
And you hope that doesn't happen too often, but it does.
Right. And Gabe Carell, and this is something I asked you before the show started, and I guess I don't know football as well as I thought. I thought that Gabe was more of a defensive end. I thought he put tremendous pressure on the quarterback, and they really could not stop Gabe.
Right. Gabe is really what we call, we have two outside guys in this 3-3 defense that we're using, and we've got three interior down linemen. One is a nose tackle and two defensive ends, and then we have three linebackers that stack over top of them. One's the middle linebacker, and then we have a strong and weak linebacker. So there are really 6 players in the box. And then we have our outside people are called Apache and Bandit, and Apache goes to the strong side and Bandit goes to the weak side, and that's Derek Schaefer, and Gabe is to the strong side. And they're really flexible in what they can do. You can get them back in pass coverage. They can be an extra run player on the line of scrimmage. You can blitz them. So you try to get somebody there that's a pretty versatile athlete. And when we studied this defense, and we really researched this defense last year, and our defensive staff had gone to Wake Forest. They were using it, and we'll probably go to West Virginia this year because that's their base defense, and they're having a lot of success with it. But that's the kind of athlete that you put there, and Gabe being a basketball player and pretty athletic and with a lot of range, he can do a lot of things. And as we look at this thing now and it's playing out, this defense is turning out to be a lot better for us than the 4-3. And we'll really take a hard look at it in the winter and see if we want to stay with it or what we want to do. But we'll make that decision at the end of the season. But we're going to play out the season with it now.
Like you said, the turnovers were a big thing, and it kept Loveland obviously in the game, and I think that it was a positive sign for your kids, like you were saying, that they didn't give up. And I think, like you're saying in previous games, that might have not been the case.
Right. They couldn't rebound from that in previous games, but we just didn't fold, and they were strong enough just to keep on plugging. And, we stayed aggressive in the game plan on both offensively and defensively. We never really got conservative or cautious and just kept going after it. I figured from an offensive standpoint that it was probably going to be a high-scoring game, and we just had to try to generate as many points as we could possibly generate.
Again, I think one of the downfalls maybe of the game was just the number of penalties again that we had. I think we ended up with, like you said, 13 penalties, and that's just
far too many, and you try to work on those things in practice. And then a lot of that, I think, has to do with different officials interpret holding differently than others. There are times when our guys are blocking the opponent, and then the opponent turns sideways and their hand ends up on their back. Some officials will call that holding, and some officials won't because they know the defender turned. And I've tried to explain that to officials, but they interpret that different, and every official doesn't interpret pass interference the same.
Right.
Yeah.
As you can see that when you watch
Right.
the games on Saturdays and Sundays. You see some interference calls that maybe you would not have called in that situation, and that has happened to us. So those are some penalties that really are based on the official's judgment more so than things that you can really correct. Two guys fighting for a ball up in the air and they call interference on you. You want your players to be aggressive, and I'm not going to tell my kids not to go for the football and be aggressive, but if they get called for interference, they get called. But I would much rather see them fight for the ball and body position than let the guy catch the ball.
I think I thought you guys offensively did a tremendous job as a coaching staff making calls offensively, and I think one of the plays that Greg talked about earlier was the play with Nate Fields on 3rd and 2. Explain something that you go through as far as your calls. I mean, that's...
Well, one of the things that we do, Danny, is first of all, when we put our game plan together on Sunday, we're going to use certain plays out of certain formations to attack the defense. And then as the week goes on, we watch practice tape, every night after practice, and we highlight the things that look good on the practice script that we're running in our play card. And then on Thursdays, I put together what's called a play script of the plays that I want to run, and most of the time they're in sequence of how we want to do it, and that we want to make sure that we use a multitude of formations and different people touching the ball, and are we attacking the strong side, are we attacking the weak side. But one of the things that we felt in the game with Loveland last year was that they did a tremendous job of breaking down our tape and scouting us. And one of the reasons why we didn't gain 100 yards rushing was because they did a tremendous job of placing their people where we like to run the ball out of certain formations. So we felt to have any success at all, because they were so good defensively, that we really had to go against all of our tendencies and really try to be as wide open as we could. And if they expected us to run to the tight end out of a certain formation, not to run to the tight end out of that formation. If we had certain sets in the past that had been primarily run sets for us, then we were going to game and make those pass formations, and that was basically how we did it, and it did cause them some problems, because they just they didn't know where to come from for their blitzes, and how they wanted to move the front and so on and so forth, and they had planned their defense based on all our tendencies, and really in the game our tendencies were quite different than they had been in the past.
Do you think that was a big... Jake Kluse was in the backfield, and I think he was also an H-back a couple times.
Right.
And I thought Jake had a tremendous game. And he did a great job of blocking. Do you think that kind of... Not seeing that too often, you think that kind of messed them up?
Yeah, it did. I don't think they expected that much I formation out of us, and we went back to, like I said last week, and did some of the old school offense, and it caught them off guard a little bit. I think they thought we would probably be in more of all our spread stuff, and we incorporated a lot of two back into the game plan.
You're sure a lot of fun to watch, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, let's look ahead to the last game of the year against Lakota West away. And Lakota West is a team that's fighting for a playoff spot. They started the season awfully strong, won their first 7 games. They lost to Coleraine. Of course, everyone loses to Coleraine. Then they lost to their rival Lakota East last week, but they're an awful strong team.
Yes, they are. They're 7-2. They won 7 games in a row, and then, like you said, they've lost the last 2 games. But they've lost to 2 really good football teams. Obviously we have those tapes in the trade, so we watched the Coleraine game, and I watched them play against Middletown. I watched them play against Lakota East, and Lakota East has really come on strong, and they're really good. And Lakota West battled both those teams. They hung in there with Coleraine for about a quarter, and then Coleraine's depth just overtakes you, their speed and everything. But Lakota West is not real complicated schematically on either side of the ball, but they're very efficient at what they do, very fundamentally sound. And defensively, they are in a 50 defense, and they are led by Dane Romero, who is their strong safety, probably the best athlete that they have on the team. They have an outside linebacker who does a real good job, named Aaron Ray, number 52. who's about 6'2", about 210, 220 pounds. Really a nice athlete, plays very aggressively, and you know, they're just very sound on defense. They play the same defense that Coleraine plays, and the same defense that Lakota East plays. It's a 50 type. Pros call it a Pro 3-4. The outside linebackers, Sam and Will, Strong and Will, weak linebackers that can play the run or drop off into the flats and play the pass. They'll angle and slant the front a little bit and play mostly zone coverage behind it. Offensively, they're pretty much a pure eye team. They will run a little bit of what we used to call, and we ran it when your brother Timmy was here in the early 90s. It was called the Syracuse freeze option. It's a midline option type thing where you pull the backside guard. They run that. They've had great success with that. And then they also run just some of your basic eye plays, you know, the isolation play with the tailback. Their leading rusher is their fullback, number 32, John Connor, who played against us some last year. And the quarterback, they took their tailback last year, Dane Romero, who was an all-conference tailback. And if I remember right, I think he was one of the top rushers, if not the top rusher in the GMC last year. And they took him and they made him the quarterback. And that's one of the reasons why they went to the option, so that he could touch the ball every play, kind of like Coleraine did with Dominic Goodman. And then they have a very tall wide receiver, and his name is Josh Chichester. He's number 81, and he's 6'6", 205. He's a junior. He has 543 yards in receptions, and he's leading the GMC in pass receptions. So we'll have our hands full. They have great size on the offensive line. Defensively, they're not quite as big, but they're pretty athletic. And they move very well. Their two linebackers do a good job of pursuing downhill to the football. So, you know, again, we're going to have to play another good football game to win. But I do think we have the capabilities of winning the football game. I think right now our players are still improving and we are on an upswing. You know, sometimes when you get to this point of the year, you know, people will have a multitude of injuries and their play starts to decline. You know, or they kind of level off, where, you know, we had so many inexperienced players at the beginning of the year. We're still making progress, as you could see. And I think, you know, like I said, a lot of people thought we might fold the 10 after the Mason game, but our kids didn't. And they just, and we're still playing our best football right now. Now, you know, we do have some injuries right now that, you know, concern me. And I don't know if those guys will get to play. You know, we'll just have to wait and see. It'll be a game time decision based on how they are. But Dane Romero got hurt in the Lakota East game. He hurt his ankle, and, you know, I would assume right now he was on crutches in their game with Lakota East. I would assume that he's questionable for Friday, and that'll have some impact or bearing on the game based on what they'll do, because he's really a great running quarterback.
Lakota West was 1-9, I think, last year, weren't they?
Yeah, they made a great turnaround.
But man, they've really turned it around.
Yeah,
they started off the first week of the year when they beat Mason.
Right, and they kind of caught Mason off guard. I don't think anybody thought that they would be this good. Coach Larry Cox has done a real good job of turning that thing around and not letting the kids lose faith in the program. And to win 7 in a row, coming off a 1-9 season, I mean, that's a heck of a job.
Well, it's the last game of the year. We have a chance to finish 6-4, which is a really good accomplishment after the way we start. We're 3-4 at one point.
Right, especially coming from that 3-4 mark, you know. And I think, like I said in some of the shows in the past, I think a team with lesser character would have folded and maybe packed it in. But these kids are such high character kids, and they've worked so hard that they were going to keep on plugging and not give up, which is, you know, great tribute to them.
With Chichester, whatever his name is, a wide receiver, with him being so tall, do you have to maybe switch and not, you know, have someone a little bit taller on him, or how do you usually handle something like that?
Well, you know, you're going to try to double cover him a little bit, you know, and then, you know, you might move your secondary around a little bit to see if you can get somebody that's a little bit taller, or has greater jumping ability to match up with him. The other thing you want to do is get some heat on the quarterback before he can get the ball out to him. So, I mean, there are a number of things that you can try, you know. How, you know, are they going to work? I don't know. We'll have to wait till we get there, you know. Again, we don't have anybody in practice that's 6'6" to simulate it. You know, so we just got to try and do the best we can and see what happens.
We see more of, I guess, for the last game, Jake Kloos in the backfield, more of that I formation, H-back thing.
Yeah, we'll keep that in. You know, we've kind of come upon these last 2 weeks of what our players really seem to do well, And, you know, I had talked to you on early shows about how people are trying to take the run away in the spread offense. And, you know, I had talked about how the teams that are very successful in college football right now are blending the spread and one back with the two back and using an H back. A classic example of that is at Miami of Ohio. They did that, you know, this year. They're doing it now. They did it when they had Ben Roethlisberger, you know. And we've taken a lot of stuff from Miami, really. That was one of the places that I studied in the off season last year, and went up there, you know, 3 or 4 times in the spring, and, you know, spent a lot of time up there, and that blended some of those offensive schemes with the clumps and stuff, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
What do you think will be the big keys for the game for you guys, offensively and defensively?
I think, again, rushing the football, you know, the ability to rush the football. That way, you know we can throw the ball pretty well, but if we can keep them off balance, and again, stopping the run, because they're a far greater threat to run the football than they are throwing the football. And if we can limit Chichester, you know, a little bit, limit him and not give him 3 or 4 big plays on us, you know, that'll be helpful. And then the fact that we've got to contain Dane Romero, you know, if he's back there under center, because he's a threat to go with that football, you know, anytime he pulls it on the option and goes. So, you know, I think those are definite keys. And again, and I think the other thing is how much intensity we play with. You know, we played with a lot of intensity and emotion in week 9 on our own field. Of course, the seniors knew it was their last home game, and there was a lot of electricity there, and I think that was a factor in our performance.
Okay, we got some questions from the viewers, so we'll start off here. I got one from Sam. He wants to know, Mason defeated Winton Woods last Friday. Were you surprised by that outcome?
Yes and no. Yes, to the fact that I thought Winton Woods' speed would hurt Mason, but no, in the fact that Mason has really come on this latter part of the season, the second half. They're as good right now as everybody thought they would be in the beginning of the year. You know, this is, you know, when everybody voted for Mason to be number 1, this is what they figured that they would look like. And they're a completely different team than they were in week 1 and 2. So you might as well take week 1 and 2 and just throw it out and look at what they've done the last 7 weeks here.
Yep. Another question, with Mason leaving our conference, it is now official, they're going to leave for the GMC, isn't it?
I don't know if it's official.
Yeah, they approved to bring them in if they want to come in.
Do you have any idea what possibilities to replace them in our league, or will they be replaced in our league?
They'll be replaced. I don't know exactly who right now. I mean, that's something the league officials will sit down and look at.
I got one more here from Shirley, who I work with. She said, who do you think was the player that you coached that improved the most during his career at Anderson?
Oh boy, that's hard, because you coach so many kids. You know, I mean, I probably couldn't single out anybody. You know, I think one of the kids, just off the top of my head, a kid named Nick Rupp, who was a little offensive lineman as a sophomore. By the time he was a senior, he was a very good starting guard for us on the 2001 team. I mean, he would be one. But there are so many kids that make so much progress between their sophomore and senior year, and you know, they work hard in the weight room, they mature physically and get bigger and faster, and you know, so there are a lot of kids.
Got one from Bart from Anderson's wanting to know, who was the best linebacker you've coached since you've been at Anderson?
Well,
we've had a few.
Yeah, I've had a few, but I'd probably say Joe Dunn is. You know, Joe Dunn was really a top-notch player. I thought he was really a special player.
He'd get my vote.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one we got was there any one player that you coached that you thought might go on to be a coach later on? Was there anyone that stuck out in your mind that might have been a coach?
You know, no, not really. No, not really. I just there were kids that showed interest in it, but I didn't know if they would follow through with it. You know, but then now we've got, you know, lots of them. Yeah, a lot of them out there, and I'm happy to see that. But I don't think, you know. Then there was a couple kids that I thought would be coaches that didn't end up. Like, I had a little kid named Nick Knapmeyer, who was a defensive back, a strong safety on that 2002 team that was a quarterback his sophomore and junior year. And then when Shue became the quarterback his junior year, we moved Nick over to defense, and Nick was actually the backup quarterback, but I would sit in quarterback meetings with him, and he had a great mind. I mean, I watched that kid, and he would pick things up out of that videotape that I'd seen coaches that have been coaching 10 years not seeing. And I said, Nick, you ought to be a coach.
Yeah. We got the last one here. Have you ever been offered a college job or any kind of a job to leave Anderson High School?
Yeah, but for one reason or another, I didn't go.
Okay.
We're glad you didn't. Okay. Let's see. You got a player for us for the where are they now?
Yeah, the player I'm going to talk about is Jamie Mons. Jamie Mons was a defensive lineman on the undefeated 1992 team that was regional finalists that year. We were 11-1, and Jamie was an integral part of that team. And Jamie's story is kind of unique because he came to us as a sophomore, and he was 5'9", excuse me, 155 pounds, and he was a slot back. His junior year, he was 6'1", 209, and he was a quarterback and defensive end. And then he grew again going into his senior year, and he played his senior year at 6'4", 245.
Wow.
And we moved him inside as a defensive tackle. Then today they call them defensive ends, or 5 techniques. And he played so well that he had 3 Division I college scholarship offers, 1 to UC, 1 to Akron, and 1 to the Air Force Academy, which is really an appointment, but they recruited him to play football. And he wanted to go to UC, and at the last minute, UC filled up right before he was supposed to take his visit. And I called my buddy at the Air Force Academy, who I'd become good friends with, who had recruited Jamie, and told him what happened with the UC situation. They brought him out to the Air Force Academy. Jamie loved it. He signed, and he went to the Air Force Academy, and he started for them for 2 years. Jamie ended up being 6'6", 275. He started for them as a defensive lineman, and he played in the Copper Bowl, and he also played against Notre Dame.
Wow.
In South Bend. He had a great career, and then as he graduated from Air Force Academy, when he had to pick his field that he was going to go in, he wanted to be a fighter pilot. Now, the trick to that is Jamie was up to 275, and to fit in the jet, you have to be down to 238.
Wow.
So he lost all that weight to get to 238 so he could fit into the jet. And now he's a fighter pilot,
really?
And he runs reconnaissance, and he flies over the Mediterranean. And he was stationed in Japan for a while, and so he's a fighter pilot, and he has his own jet with his name on it. So
that's great.
That decision to go to the Air Force Academy played out pretty well for him.
Great.
That's great. We're going to do our players of the week this week. On offense, we've got 2 players. We got Vince Palmer and Jake Clues had great games. We have defensively, we had Gabe Carell. And special teams, Jimmy Tafano, I don't think he missed an extra point, so he had a great game. We want to thank all of our sponsors that have helped us out throughout the year. And just in closing, real quick, I want to ask everybody about, we do a juvenile diabetes dance for my son, Tyler, who's 14. And he's had it since he was 3 years old. He's had like 17,000 shots. He's had 17,000 finger pricks and 10,000 shots. So we do a dance every year. We try to raise money, and we'd like anybody out there that's watched these broadcasts, I know we've talked about it before, if they could show up, we'd really appreciate it. Any kind of donations or anything. It's at American Legion 72 in Mount Carmel. If there's any questions, give me a call.
It's November 6th.
November 6th, so it'll be the next weekend. So if anybody can come, I'd really, really appreciate it.
So it's a great time. Danny does a great job of getting prizes, and it's just a good time. It's for a good cause. So, Absolutely. Coach, good luck this week.
Thank you.
Last game of the year. I know you hate seeing the last game come, but good luck in it.
I am. I hate to see the season end.
Absolutely, especially when we're on the upswing like we are. So.
Sure.
Thank all the folks who made this broadcast possible. The folks at Anderson Union Community Television, Justin Hawthorne, Andy Crozier. Appreciate their help, and appreciate Coach Suriano spending his time with us every Monday night like he has been doing. And for Danny Albers, I'm Greg Ellis. Join us next week on Redskin Review.